All right. So, you know, as I was saying, my mom told me I never had enough Tonka toys when I was little, and I loved to play in the dirt. And so it's not a shock that I ended up, my first experience was buying a bulldozer which we have a story about this in the book that was not my greatest moment in business. But I decided I had to play in the dirt bigger than Tonka toys. And then it led me to meet a family that was farming who was close to where I lived. And he put me on a tractor one day, and I was hooked. And I thought this was more fun than anything I've ever done. So I fell into farming that way. But then I learned, it's a real business. And it's an important part of every economy in the world. And it's a really important part of a growing economy. So as I got the opportunity to have some financial resources to do something on a bigger scale, I immediately went to agriculture, which immediately puts you in the arena of food security. And the first thing I learned that was amazing to me as I traveled through Africa, I've been in 51 of 54 countries. I get 2 more in December, and I've got Mauritania left. So now I've got to get to 54. I'm too close. But when you travel across that many countries with that many growing zones and that many challenges, the one thing that still sticks with me that just is amazing is that you have millions of farmers that have families that are starving. That's just, to me, that concept is just wrong. And so as a farmer and someone who loves agriculture, it is absolutely where I feel our primary focus should be.
Howie, you talked a moment ago when we were talking about the lessons learned from your grandfather, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, on return to investors and that sort of thing, and how you apply that to philanthropy. Explain that to us.
No, absolutely. Well, and first and foremost, those are lessons that I've had the benefit of observing over the last 15 years. As we've pulled these stories together through 40 Chances, this has all been really, I see myself as a sidekick, sort of. I guess I'm Robin and the Batman and Robin, and so I've been able to.
He took my cape away.
So I've had such a great benefit of observing the way that my father has evolved in his philanthropic work over time, and how the lessons we've learned can apply this way as well. So specific to that question, if you ask my grandfather what it is first and foremost to look for when he's thinking about buying a business, it's who the manager is. It's the person who's running that business, who he knows is going to be better in doing that than almost anyone else he could look to. And so for us, one of our number one rules is find people that we want to invest in and invest in their success. And we've got a whole number of stories in 40 Chances specifically about the people we have found all over the world who we are
Give me a
investing
good
in their
example.
success. Well, actually, do you want to talk about Joe and what his work has been?
There's really 2 I kind of have to talk about. If I talk about Joe DeFries is somebody who runs the PASS program, which actually is a program the Rockefeller Foundation started in a long legacy of supporting agriculture that no one will ever match. And Joe is this hard-driving guy that won't give up. Started in the business of trying to get seeds to farmers, used to fly in small airplanes, got shot at during the war in the conflict in Mozambique, had colleagues killed in Sierra Leone. I mean, this guy is a veteran in the seed business. And today, with the help of the Gates Foundation and some continuing, and help from us, we've tried to get him in some of the environments where we work, Sierra Leone, Liberia, South Sudan, and it's been tougher to get everyone to support that, but they've come along. And he is changing the way that Africa needs to get seeds, how African farmers get seeds. And other than soil fertility, seeds are the most important thing for a farmer to have success. And to give you an example, we started in Sierra Leone on a different project with CARE, and after a year it was really failing because and it involved some support through the PASS program on seeds. And we couldn't figure it out at first, and then when we went back and really looked at it, it was failing because there was the people we were working with, the farmers we were working with, had been given seeds and fertilizer by another organization, And they stopped showing up. He said, well, you're not giving us anything. And that's part of the mindset that we're trying to talk about in 40 Chances. We can't keep doing what hasn't worked. And
is that a problem with our U.S. Agricultural and foreign aid approach?
Yeah, and that's another subject, but I'm glad to address it here in Washington. I'll give you another quick example, and I'm glad to answer that. I'll jump right in there. But another guy I got to just tell you, Emmanuel, who runs Virunga National Park, we're going to spend about $40 million, well, it'll be over $40 million, and over $35 million of that 40 will be directly into North Kivu, DRC, the most conflict, long-term ridden location probably in my lifetime. 5-6 million people killed over the last decade. I hate to put it this way, but it's a blunt way to put it. It's the rape capital of the world. If you have a wife or a daughter, chances are they'll be raped. I mean, think of growing up in that environment. Think of, how can you not believe in trying to change that, and stopping that? And so, we're there as a private foundation in the United States, spending way more money than anybody else is spending because it's high risk, but I see it as high reward. And so Emmanuel, I'll give you a really specific example of why we invest in people that we can trust. Emmanuel sends us an email the day before Thanksgiving. The M23 rebel group have gone in and occupied Goma, a million plus people, the largest town in eastern Congo. And he says the FARDC, the government troops, cut the power lines when they exited the city. And hospitals have no power. But a really big problem is, and we saw this in 2008, 2009, there's no pumps working, no filtering system working for the water system. We have people taking water directly from the lake. We had over 1,000 people a day dying in 08, 09 from cholera. He says, we've got to do something. Now, this is a guy who runs the national park. Okay, he has no responsibility in Goma. But he says, I can get 4 generators in here and get the pumps working. It's like anyone who could tell me you could get 4 generators into Goma, DRC, in 2 days, I would call him either crazy or a liar. But we know Emmanuel, and he said he could do it. So Thanksgiving was the next day. I called Tricia at our foundation, said, Tricia, can we get the $200,000 to Emmanuel? Can we wire it Friday? And she said, yeah, the banks are open. We wired it without knowing any more than sketchy details. Emmanuel, all we could do is get him the message the money's coming. By Sunday afternoon, he had 3 generators working. I mean, that's like a miracle to people. So it's the best $200,000 we ever spent, probably saved more lives. In the process, he went to 4 NGOs. There's 70 plus NGOs working in Goma. They're all leaving. They're all working on their exit plan because the conflict has escalated. And that's, I mean, look, some people don't want to be there, I get that. But I would rather be going in at that time. And so we went to 4 different NGOs and said, can we get diesel fuel or can we get money for diesel fuel? And it was declined by all 4 of them. They said, we have higher priorities. We've got to move our people. That's a wrong priority if you're going to be in there. If you're really there for the right reason, it's the wrong priority. So, he had these up and running. They now have a permanent backup plan. But you can only do that because you know the person. And because you can invest in that person and you believe him and you have total confidence and faith in that person. So that's what we look for. And Tony Blair, you guys have worked with Tony. Tony is another phenomenal partner in Africa that gives. Tony's a guy Tony, Emmanuel, Joe, I mean, that's the hope for the world. Yeah. That's the hope for Africa. Those are people that are on the ground changing things, and they make personal sacrifice to do it. We don't make a personal sacrifice. We are able to get on an airplane and go over there. We come home 6-7 days later. There's no sacrifice involved.
But you say you don't make a personal sacrifice. I know exactly what you mean. But in the book, you talk about putting yourself in very dangerous situations, which
That's
surprises
fun, Walter.
me. Tell me about that.
I mean, I get to show up. I get a phone call. I'm planting the last 40 acres of my soybeans 2 years ago. I get a phone call from a person who is deeply engaged in the counter LRA activity, and she says, you need to be on an airplane tonight to Uganda. And I said, I got to finish my soybeans and I got to park my tractor somewhere. And she said, okay, then you got to be on an airplane tomorrow. And I called Ann. I said, get sleeping bags. We're going to be at a forward operating base in Central African Republic, and we're going to be sleeping there. Get sleeping bags. We're going on, get an airplane, do something, figure out how we can get there. We landed, and we got to go up to South Sudan undisclosed location in a small military base. Meet a colonel who's running the operations for all of Uganda for trying to get Coney, and spoke to him for an hour. And then they bring out Caesar Chellam, one of the worst warlords for the last 20-some years ever. And my job, given to me by the commander of the U.S. forces over there and others, was to get this guy smiling, looking good.
That was easy.
Yeah, and so I can't, I told this at dinner the night before the U.S. commander, and Shannon and Larry go, yeah, this is what you got to do, because we're going to put them on flyers. We're going to drop tens of thousands of flyers, and we're going to get, and these flyers have brought hundreds of defections out of the LRA, and we've recovered hundreds of victims as a result of this. And so there was a real purpose in this. And so I woke up in the morning, I said, I always travel with a jar of Jiffy peanut butter and Welch's grape jelly, and I found these really cool little Wonder Bread boxes that you can put these Wonder Bread. And I have the kit. If you want the kit, I can tell you what to get. And a little plastic knife. And so I thought, I'm going to fix them. I had heard for 5 days that the general loved pasta. That was what they'd been giving him since they'd brought him in from the jungle. And so I started talking to him, and I said, what do you eat in the jungle? He said, we eat roots, and we eat, leaves, and we eat, he's telling me, that sounds great. And so I said, well, you've been eating pasta. That's an Italian cuisine, kind of, and I said, I want to give you some real food from America. And I said, I brought this over just for you.
Peanut butter.
So I told a little lie. I mean, it was really kind of for me, but I said, I brought it, but I wanted to feel, and he's a general. And so I said, I want to fix you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. This is like historical in America, and so he says, okay, and he's got these bloodshot eyes, and he's tired, and he's tough, talking to this guy. Perfect English. And so, and one of the things you have to do in that environment, it's the same thing you have to do with photography, is you can disarm somebody, but you also have to do what you have to do to get what you're after. And so I immediately went into the subservient mode that, this guy expects people to do what he wants them to do, and I got him water, Now
I just want to be clear. So the purpose of getting him smiling on this photo, I wanted to make sure everyone understood that, which is that Coney and his psychopathic regime was telling everyone, if you defect, they will torture you or they will kill you, and you should never defect as a result.
Yeah, the rumors were already that they had tortured and killed Chellam.
Yeah.
So
you wanted him smiling for the flyers.
Looking
exactly.
good,
To prove that wouldn't happen.
But it also proves the connection between geopolitics and food security.
On a micro level, exactly.
Peanut butter is better than bark. I know that.
Peanut butter and jelly diplomacy.
But he's sitting there. And I make the sandwich in front of him, and I cut it in half, and I asked him, if he wanted to select which half, because they poison people over there. and he said, no, that's okay. But then he clearly waited for me to take 2 bites out of my half before he would eat. That was very clear. And he said, yeah, okay. And I said, what do you think? It's good? And that was a wrong terminology, I guess. And Shannon she says, General, is it tasty? She says, do you like it? He says, oh, it's tasty. And we got this huge smile out of it, like 1 second, And Dan led my camera, and he's clicking. And I can hear it. I think, thank God he's getting it. And then we got him with his family. And we'd brought civilian clothes on the airplane in case he didn't have any, and all this stuff. And the result is that you have gone into the toughest places in the world and provided information that people believe. And pictures, you got to have pictures, because on the front of it is the pictures of a Chellam, and 3 different pictures, 2 of them which I took, one I took and Dan took, and on the back is a diagram, a sketch of how you give yourself up, because most people can't read. So, pictures are everything. And so we've dropped them over DRC, CAR, South Sudan, and there'll be up to 1 million flyers here soon. And so, it's that may be risky, but I got to tell you, I love doing it. I mean, it's fun. Somebody's got. I like that. Somebody's got to do it.
Got to do it. And there's
Keep telling your mom that.
Yeah, I know. She is. Yeah, and there's actually a picture of the flyer in the introduction in the book, in 40 Chances. So if you guys want to see what it looks like, that's the actual flyer.
Speaking of his mom, everybody talked about your dad. Tell me what you learned from your mom.
My mom was phenomenal. I think what I learned from my mom in the macro aspect is that we absolutely need more women in leadership positions. I mean, we've got to do it. We still fight it in this country, and one of it's in our DNA and our culture somehow as men and a men's society. And so it's almost like men want to see women fail sometimes when they get into a position of power, and it's because they're threatened. But the truth is, the other thing I learned from her and more from my father is that you've got to put smarter, better people around you. I mean, that's how you look better. I mean, it's selfish, but we don't pick dumb people in our foundation, And if they're smarter than I am and they can do better than I can do, that's all the better. I mean, so you have this huge untapped. It's not as big as it was, but you have half of your country that, for stupid reasons, you've excluded the same opportunity as the other half. And, if you think, you just boil it down to home, I could not do what I've done in my lifetime without my wife. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true in every aspect of what we do. If you had half the countries in Africa with women presidents, it would be different. Mm-hmm. It would be different.
You promised me you'd get on to Are We Doing It Right in food assistance.
Oh, I thought you were going to forget that.
We're in Washington.
Yeah, well, it's a great place to say. I've been beat up a little bit by the lobby on this one, but that's all right because they're wrong. They might get paid more than I do, but they're not. They're wrong. And I got asked this question yesterday by a reporter, and they said, well, what's wrong with profit? I said, there's nothing wrong with profit. Profit in the capitalistic system has generated more generosity and flexible dollars to help people in the world than any system ever. And so profit is great, but when you get to greed, and that greed ultimately keeps people hungry or poor, that is wrong. And if you look at our system on how, first of all, we have the greatest legacy in food assistance globally, bar none. And nobody is going to touch us. And I hope not in the future, because they sure can't do it on a historical basis. So, PL 480, all the other, Dan could rattle all the details off. I can't. But, that leadership has been, I think, tarnished in one way, which is we've allowed businesses, and they're not even really American businesses all today, to benefit from a system that's designed to help people. And so when you have requirements that a certain amount has to be shipped on U.S. lines, and today the idea that there was a reason for that in 1954. There was a reason for that because we were maintaining a seaworthy fleet and we were doing these things. That is just a false reason today in this world today. I mean, it would be like still holding up one of those cell phones that, was a brick, and living in that era. I mean, times have changed. Things have moved on. Our policies, we can't afford anymore to have inefficient policy. And people who are hungry can't afford us to allow inefficient policy to drive our actions. And so I believe that if those lobbyists can be paid because they are benefiting from a capitalistic system, then let them live in a capitalistic system for the people who are poor and hungry. Let them show through competition, through efficiencies, that they are the best people to ship that food. They aren't willing to do that. The day they do that, I'll shut up. But that's not what they're doing. They're sending lobbyists to Washington and getting money in the right place so they can maintain a system that is completely outdated and hurts people. Now, if that's not clear enough, I'll keep going.
Thank you. Howie, you actually still live in Omaha most of the time,
I try.
Right?
Yeah.
And although you're on planes a lot, third generation in Omaha. Do you still farm at all, your family?
Well, actually, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm actually on my third chance, believe it or not. Out of 40 chances, this is my third year farming our family farm. It's in Nebraska. It's about an hour.
What is it, corn?
400 acres of corn and soybeans.
Soybeans.
Yeah, and sometimes we have a little competition about various things on our farms, but he always wins.
Well, actually,
How much corn per acre?
He blows me out of the water.
First of all, I heard when we get done with this part of our tour, we get 4-day break. we're going back, I'm bringing a small army to go back to pick corn so that we get Howie's corn done.
Yeah.
But I really hurt my back, so he has to let me run the combine.
Yeah, right, he gets to run the combine.
He also cheats because he has irrigation.
What have you learned from running a farm that applies to what we're talking about today?
Oh, well, an endless. How much time do we have? Farming, running a farm is an unbelievable experience. It puts you in touch with the land, first of all, in a way that we never get around here. Even if you're hiking out, in a park nearby, it's completely different than that. And I have learned so much from my father when it comes to farming. He used to hand me a rake and tell me to go rake the dirt and do different things. I mean, it was really like, he used farming also as a tool to teach me a good work ethic, and specifically about stewardship. And stewardship is critical because it matters in all respects, whether it's about money or your family's values or whatever it might be. One thing that's been so important for us about farming, and for me personally, has been to understand the importance of soil. It really has been. And we talk about this all the time. And one of my heroes here in the United States is a farmer named Clay Mitchell. He's in his 30s. Clay is a guy who went off. He got his biomedical engineering degree from Harvard. And then he went back to his family farm near Buckingham, Iowa, and got 200 acres. And he's a farmer there now.
It just shows Harvard can't corrupt everybody. That's a joke. And graduated from Harvard. That's why I said
that. We tease our staff a little bit. But no, so Clay's an unbelievable guy. And he's given me a lot of hope, especially, and he's, how many corn stalks did he go in? And it's 1,200. Yeah, so he's like a wizard. And he went in and he barcoded 1,200 different corn stalks as he was growing it out one year, and has been monitoring these and testing whether it's air and soil quality and I can't even nitrogen utilization and runoff, all of this stuff. And he's inventing new equipment, and he is really the farmer of the future. That's what Time magazine called him.
When you rake the dirt,
that was
get a tablespoon of dirt. Tell me what you learned.
Not dirt. That's the difference.
Soil.
So a tablespoon of dirt will get you nothing.
Soil. Sorry.
Yeah, a tablespoon
doesn't taste good either.
Yeah, no. A tablespoon of highly organic soil has more living organisms than there are people on the planet, and that is a single tablespoon of highly organic soil. It is a world that we know almost nothing about. But what we do know is that we can show up, we can plant the seed, we can treat the land we need to, and eventually, we get a crop and we'll harvest it and everything's fine. But over time, we're learning that the value of soil and our long-term productivity potential is suffering quite a lot. And it's been explained to me as thinking of the treads on your tire. When you go out and you're driving your car, and the tire tread wears down over time, you never really notice. You don't pay attention to this. And for many, many years, we've been doing the same thing to our soil. And like I said, I've only been farming for 3 years, so I have a very limited scope on this. But it's something that
is there an artificial or technological way we can replenish the soil?
Well, I don't want to give a straight no because there's, I'm sure, many things going on in the world that I don't know about, but not really. No.
Here, Walter, the answer to that is when you can replace 1 billion living organisms in a teaspoon with technology, when you can build organic matter and change the cation exchange ratio, which are things that are critical to soil health, when you can do that with technology, then you can do something. But short of those things, technology, you can't shortcut some things in the world. I mean, and to be honest with you, we've been searching for technology to cure cancers. We've been searching for technology for a lot of things in the world and haven't figured it out. And we're not even close to being able to do that with soil.
So when we focus on seeds as being the important thing, in some ways it's more of a brown revolution we have to worry about. We should focus on soil and soil.
We've pushed the terminology brown revolution to get people trying to think differently about than what famously was a green revolution, which was a phenomenal period in agricultural history. It's not it's not at all saying that taking any of the value away. I mean, Norman Borlaug was an amazing individual. I mean, but because of what he did, we can talk about a brown revolution. I mean, some things come first, and so we know we can have success. We know we can beat productivity goals, but we also know that there's limits to that. I mean, if you look at soybeans in the United States, we can't break the ceiling. If you look at corn, our averages went down for 3 years. Some of that is another reason technology can't solve the problem. I was mentioning to you earlier, we grew 193 bushel corn this year on a farm where we picked 22 bushel an acre
That's
corn last year.
193 bushels per acre,
yeah.
down to 22.
Yeah,
bushels
last
per
year
acre,
because of
yeah.
the drought,
Yeah.
and we had aflatoxin so bad that we had neighbors that were picking corn, opened up their sieves, and ran their combine and spread the corn in the field. They weren't thinking about how to deal with it next year, but
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
But you know, it was that bad. So you know, technology can't fix that either. I mean, there's all sorts of
So
elements.
what
of
do we need to
agriculture.
do?
Well, the very first thing we have to do is, and it's a little different in the U.S. than it is in Africa, but we have to focus on our long-term success. We've lost more soil since 1970 than we lost in this country than we lost in the Dust Bowl. But you have great images of losing soil. It's like what Howie's talking about the tire trade. You know, we don't see it today. And soil, you can sell me the best seeds in the world, which we have. You can sell me fertilizer. You can sell me anything you want. If I'm trying to put it on soil that is not live and active, it's not growing much. You learn that as a farmer. I mean, we have mapping systems today. This is where technology is phenomenal. We have mapping systems today, and I can look at the maps, and I can look at what I did, and we start looking at 3-foot grids about how do we deal with our soil issues and our productivity issues. That's amazing.
And how does that apply to Africa?
It doesn't right now. I mean, it really doesn't. And now we have 9,000 acres in South Africa. We farm in South Africa just like we do here. And we have 3 of the greatest looking oxen in South Africa. And we're building 2-row planters, 1-row planters, small roller crimpers. We're trying to come up with a drill. Our whole goal in this is to come up with a farming system that small farmers can adopt that give them the ecological and natural ability to rebuild their soils. And we've got a great partnership with Pioneer, DuPont, John Deere. If you'd ever told me when I started this conversation 5 years ago with John Deere, the people there, that they would be actually having a conversation about how to build something for oxen, I would have told you it was never going to happen. We're talking to them, and they're serious about it. So in Arizona, we took a farm in Arizona that replicated some of the challenges we have in Africa, and it's much easier to do it in Arizona than in Africa. And so that's where we test the equipment. And then we have a great guy in Africa, Tim LaSalle, who used to run the Rodale Institute, who has been gracious enough to spend the last 5 years over there, and we keep him there as long as we can, who is doing the same thing in Africa. And so we have oxen in Arizona, we have oxen in South Africa, and we're looking with the biggest companies in the world and working with the poorest farmers in the world and trying to bring that all together and say, how do we have something that really works for these farmers going forward?
Yeah, context appropriate.
Let me open it up, since I know there are a lot of other experts in this room. Yes, right here.
What about the issue of water? My understanding is with over 7 billion people in the world, over 1 billion of them have inadequate access to potable water every day. Water is obviously a critical ingredient in making soils grow and produce. What is being done to supply the water, either through old technology, new technology? Where does that stand for farming and human consumption?
Well, boy, there's a lot to say to that. We have something called a global water initiative, which really isn't global. It's Central America and a lot of Africa, but we like the word global. So it was, we call it GWI. I sat down with almost 300 years of experience around a table, and I said, I've got 2 options. I can hire a bunch of experts and consultants and tell you, this was CRS, CARE, IIED, a number of NGOs. Who?
Oxfam.
Yeah, well, they didn't stay in it. Be quiet over there.
Yeah.
So,
I want to hear my child. Yeah.
So-
Oh, no, this is boring.
wait till I get them home. You know, I said that's one option. The other option is to sit and listen to you guys and tell us what we're going to do wrong as a foundation if we attack the water issue. And you know, then they came back and said, well, what would you like it to look like? And I was so stupid back then. I just said, I'd love to have this map with 10,000 pins on it that says we drilled wells and we brought water to all these villages. That was the dumbest answer I could have given. And they were polite. They didn't say that to me then. They'll say it to me now. But I said, what are the issues? Number one, if it isn't sexy in water, donors don't want to do it. So that means it's a 1-year program, a 2-year program. You can't fix an issue like, well, not fix, you can't address an issue like this without a longer horizon. So I was willing to commit to 10 years and then see where we were. Then they said no one wants to do transboundary work. It's difficult. It's hard to, you know, you'll have setbacks constantly, so you would have spent money trying to get this done, and then some government does something different and you can't do it. I said, okay, so we got to do transboundary work. That's clear. I mean, you look at a map and you look at a watershed, and it doesn't know that the borders between, you know, Uganda and Ethiopia or something. It's a watershed, and it crosses a lot of countries. And then they said no one wants to do advocacy. You can't measure impact half the time. It's big ideas that you don't, you know, you can't always formulate in a way that comes back and you can say, oh, wow, we had a success. And they had about 5 things like that. And so I'm sitting there with my gut turning, honestly, thinking, I don't want to do any of this stuff. But then I had to think, this is why I asked them to come.
Right.
And so we went into GWI addressing all of those issues. We found a very interesting thing. The NGOs with a 10-year horizon could not think in 10 years. They thought year to year. One of the problems is their internal policies wouldn't let them do it, okay? So until they had a commitment from us, and I will tell you, we were the most liberal people in this. We'd be criticized for some of it, that we would get something from them as their proposal to approve, and we absolutely did not micromanage it. And so we approved most of what we got to see what they could do, because we didn't want to. They're supposed to be experts. Let's see what they can do. Let's see what the performance is. And they could not perform. They could not think 10 years. They couldn't think 3 years. And so what they were criticizing foundation thinking was actually their own problem too. I mean, it's everybody's problem. And so today, after 5 years, we're going in our 6th year. We made a major adjustment and brought it back to agriculture and water, period, because they couldn't do what we were trying to do. And hopefully in agriculture and water, we can do more of it and be a little more
That's another
focused.
lesson you learned from your father, which is keep it focused.
Keep us focused. Yeah, he told me, he says, now, Howie, there's this thing called a circle of competence. He says, yours is very small. So you need to understand that circle. Yeah. I said, yes,
Keep
Dad.
focused and
I
I see my friend Michael Elliott here, who runs the one
Michael,
campaign.
you're hiding. You're
Yeah,
hiding.
and one.org with Bono. Why don't Michael, and by the way, his wife Emma Oxford has just published a wonderful family memoir, which you should ask her about, which is really cool, about when the British were traveling the world doing things like this. But Michael, why don't
Now,
you
you know I'm on his board.
I know.
Howard's on my board, absolutely.
I figured since you were his boss, he should. His two bosses.
I don't think so.
And a very good one, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be partnering with some of the stuff around 40 Chances. Howard, I've been on a combine in your farm in southern Illinois.
I didn't let you drive it, though, did
You
I?
didn't let me drive it. But I've spent 6 hours harvesting soybean, and I know from then and I know from today your infectious love of the land and love of farming. In a lot of the world, farming is regarded as yesterday's business, as old-fashioned, as the thing that you try and escape so that you can go to the kind of bright lights in the big city. We all know that farming is the key, agriculture is the key to reducing poverty, particularly in Africa. Far better kind of scale on poverty reduction if you invest in agriculture than anything else. How do we make it attractive to young people? How does your sort of and Howie's wonderful, infectious love for this get translated into people?
Why'd you let him ask a question? That's very difficult.
Generation.
I think the way it becomes attractive is that the leadership, all the way from the top to the bottom, understands the importance of it, because this is never going to be sexy. Okay, there's no way to make this sexy. I don't believe. Now, if you love doing it, that's different. But people love doing lots of things, and so it doesn't work that way. I think that the quickest way. Well, let me back up. In Africa, you have a lot of countries going to have 60, 70, some of them 80% of the people in rural areas. Okay, and some of this is in the brief that we worked with one on, which I think everybody here has. The fastest way to bring economic stability and economic independence to a country like that is invest in agriculture in the rural areas. Now, you have to have somebody, number one, that understands it, but then you have to have the dynamics that allows the leader to do it. And that's where one is so great, honestly. I'm not saying that because you're sitting here, because the data report, things that, you've got to call people out. You've got to say the transparency and accountability has to be there. So when you talk about agriculture, you're talking about, a group of people that have tended to be disenfranchised, lower educated, fragmented. There are places in Africa where that's the advantage to the leader, because if he doesn't, there are places in Africa and there are places in the world. So I'm not picking on Africa. I'm trying to answer the question. If I'm a leader and I can get what I want, and the system allows me, and the process allows me to get what I want through an oil deal or a diamond deal or a cobalt deal or whatever it is, if I can do that and I can get away with it, there are some who will do it and some who won't. But the ones who do it do huge damage, because they don't have to worry about your vote. They don't have to worry about you paying taxes. They've got a way around it. And those are the kind of dynamics that Tony's working on, that you're working on a more narrow platform. And those are the things we have to change. And it's going to be ugly to do it, because some things are just not pretty. And you got to call it out. And we try to do some of that in the book, but we also believe that there's a lot of hope going forward, and people have to have the hope to to survive and to move forward. So if you can't take the leadership and get them to understand the importance of it, and I know I'll shorten it up, but if you look at America, every one of our founding fathers was a farmer. They established a process in the very beginning of land ownership, okay, which is absolutely key. You will not succeed in Africa without land ownership rights and without the ability to build soil fertility. Those two things, you will fail. You can do all the other things. You can build big ports. You can build roads. You got to produce it. You got to know how to get it done. And so, if you look at the 1800s in this country, the Morale Act, the land grant universities, USDA established in the early 1800s, we've had 200 years of incredible growth and commitment and trillions of dollars, really, in how do we grow food better and get it to people. And we still got a long ways to go to get it the best we can in this country. But you can't do that in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. So it's got to be, the only answer I have is you've got to make it to where that leader cares enough about the people in the country, which is another issue, that's big, and then they got to understand this is the solution to a huge proportion of that country.
Did you, yeah, go ahead. I'll get here, yeah, that's right.
Thanks very much. Whenever conversations in Washington always sort of turn toward policy, and as I've been listening to both of you, and especially, and I'm sorry, is it Howie?
I'm the sequel, so
right.
Howard and Howard 2 is fine.
And I know why you're going to do it, because he's the smartest one. So
Yeah.
I get it, but yeah.
Well, I was thinking about his just 3 years farming.
Yeah.
And I wondered if somewhere, I've sort of been thinking about America's seed corn, our youth. And I've been thinking about, when I listen to you talk about this and the way that you talk about it, I wonder whether you are thinking about, or partnerships that you might form that would engage young kids and unemployed youth in experiences that that have everything to do with the kind of subject matter you're talking about. I can't say it any better.
Yeah. Well, and you've touched on two different but related challenges. One I would speak to, which would be around some urban poverty, and a lot of young individuals in highly urban areas that will never, because of the condition of their birth, have access to travel out and to see farmland and to experience what it means to grow food and all sorts of things. And so there's a disconnect there that is difficult to overcome. On the partnership side, we have had an incredibly wonderful connection with two groups that I was involved in as I was young. One was FFA, Future Farmers of America, and the other is 4-H. I'm on the National Board of 4-H. And
They're big partners of ours.
They're huge partners of ours, and we've been trying, and it's not always easy to do because of the way that national systems can be disjointed. But similar to extension, where you've got a lot of decentralization of the system, you've got youth all over the country, and so it's not like it's an easy come up with a solution and then go pay the money and you get it done. But that is what gives me a lot of hope still, is interacting with the students who are in FFA, who are unbelievable. You remember the kid that introduced you at the FFA chapter? He had,
Amazing, though.
Unbelievable. And interacting with the 4-H youth too, and working with them. We've been trying to get them more and more educated on rural hunger. And one of our other key partners there is Feeding America, and work we've been doing with connecting rural hunger and agricultural communities with folks who need more assistance. So that's been one way, and with FFA we've been doing programs like that as well. And then on a last note, circling back to this kind of urban structure that we have in place, one of the programs we launched with 40 Chances, as part of our 40 Chances program, was really an ag and nutrition challenge for high school students anywhere in the country, but this program really targets a lot of urban youth to come up with new creative ideas that we would never even think of. We launched it at Bryan High School in Omaha, Nebraska, and these students were coming up with ideas we would never even think of.
One of the interesting lessons also from your grandfather is don't reinvent things that you could already exist, and you can bring them to scale.
Yeah.
And we do that in our country far too much, it seems like, create new programs. When you have 4-H, which has worked for generations, when you have Future Farmers of America, when you have Boys and Girls Clubs, to scale those is often the better way to do it.
Now, can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Only, sorry.
Get you,
Only
don't
because
worry.
the reason he's here is he's the optimist and I'm the pessimist.
No.
So I want to tell you just one story. It's a very unfair story.
He's an optimist.
So I'll put that in perspective. But how he's talking about, he's talking to the 500 top leaders of FFA, and this is 1 out of 500 kids. So keep it in perspective. But I was sitting 2 days later in the Dubai airport, and one of the mentors of these guys sent me an email, and he said, "I got to tell you this story because it's very upsetting." And the next day I was in Rwanda and DRC, and there's a reason I'm telling you that. So one of the young men got up and left this. We had put a book called Fragile, which is, you might not want it because it weighed so much. It's like 9.5 pounds. But it's a real strong look at hunger and poverty and the way it is. And it's photography and stories. And he had left it there and he's walking out. And the mentor walked up, and he's a teacher, and he says, "Don't want you out your book." And he says, "I don't want that book. That's a book about lazy people." So the next day, I'm in Rwanda, and I'm watching 10-year-old kids carry a load that I couldn't carry as far as they carry. And I'm thinking, this is such, and it's a very isolated, you have to keep it in context, but I only tell it because we still have work to do in this country. I mean, I don't know what those other 499 kids thought, and I don't know how they looked at the book. But when you live in a society this rich and this convenient and with these many luxuries, I don't care if we're having a tough time, our tough time doesn't come close to anybody else's tough time. I mean, it is hard to deliver this message.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Prescott, and I'm currently at the State Department. But prior to that, I spent many years as a biologist cultivating microorganisms that I'm very excited to hear you singing the praises of.
Cool.
One of the questions I have in looking at this issue is that there's a lot of emerging science that we don't yet have. And even if we do have science, it often applies in the developed world, but not in the developing world.
Got that
And
right.
I don't know if you've heard of the concept of citizen science or any of the tools, and particularly around kind of a knock-on to a lot of the grand challenges where we're getting a lot of cheap, ruggedized, developing world-friendly basically instruments that we can use to take measurements. Are you looking at all at trying to empower scientists of the making farmers into scientists to help them measure the microorganisms, the various characteristics, much like you described
Well,
this,
let me
this farmer
answer that
doing?
in a couple of ways. One is when I was standing in Eldorette Canyon a few years ago with a woman who had corn that I could have grown in Illinois. I was like really impressed. And I said, how'd you do this? She says, I put fertilizer on it. I said, where'd you get the fertilizer? Oh, it's the bag that I got from the government. And I said, well, what is it? She says, it's 1034O. And I said, wow, okay. I said, do you know what 1034O is? And she says, no, it comes in a bag. And I said, okay, did they do any soil sampling before? She didn't even know what soil sampling was. So when you start talking about, you know, taking technology to other parts of the world, and this is a very productive part of the Rift Valley. I mean, you know, this is a huge challenge. But the truth is, we also have someone who's been working for 5 years on our farm in South Africa that only works with small farmers and ideas for smallholder farmers, and they have access to 180 countries where they distribute information, and they work with the science community, and that's one of the things that we do. I'm sure we could do it better and we could do it more. It's probably one of our big shortcomings is we spend so much time in the field that we probably don't spend enough time getting ourselves as educated as we should be on some of the other things going on in the world. There is so much going on. Josette Sharon flew down with us on the airplane today, and she like blew me away with all the stuff going on that she's doing, and it's like, wow, I should have known that. I should have known that, you know. And I just the knowledge and the things that are going on out there, that's going to be one of the solutions, is tapping into that, coordinating it, not reinventing things, and figuring out how do you apply something as complicated as real biological science to a woman in Eldorette, Kenya, who is just trying to feed her family. I mean, she doesn't want to be a scientist, but she wants to produce food.
If you'll stick around afterwards, too, I'd love to hear more about the concept of the citizen scientist.
Yeah.
Maybe all three of us can talk. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you could clarify the agricultural strategies that you have for Africa. I was talking to a Kenyan diplomat off the record a few days ago. He voiced a lot of reservation about the U.S. role in implementing agricultural solutions for Africa, specifically regard to patented seeds and the genetic modification that comes with them. And with the arsenal of tools, other strategies for growing crops, including plus distribution, are these some of the methods that we should be exploring?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is that somebody like Joe DeFries, he'll tell you leave the GMOs at home. He says, I got a big enough problem just getting farmers to understand hybrids, and they can't afford a lot of high technology. And Joe and I had a lot of conversations about that, because I've told Joe, why don't you spend a little time working on open pollinated varieties, OPVs, because that will even help the more poor farmers, you know, gain better productivity, because you've got to talk about affordability. I mean, it's all about affordability, accessibility, and knowledge. And if you don't have those three things as a farmer, you're in trouble. And so that's why a lot of farmers are in trouble in Africa. The debate gets so convoluted when you start talking about GMOs, because it gets very polarized, very politicalized. The most important thing I can say about it is make sure that every country is well informed and has the opportunity to make the choices that they think are best for their farmers, and include farmers in that process, and make sure they're educated about it. I will tell you that our farm, I have sat at a table with an organization that is so anti-GMO that, you know, and this gentleman said to me, this is 4 or 5 years ago, he says GMOs are, and I mean, first of all, I want to back up and say I agree with that minister or the prime, whoever it was. Africa should not look like we look like in agriculture. I absolutely believe that, and I can tell you 100 reasons why and 100 reasons how it should look different. But on the GMO question, you know, this guy said GMOs have reduced productivity in this country. They're making the yields go down. And I said, really? I said, how's that happened on your farm? Well, I don't farm. I said, well, I'll tell you what. I can show, if you want to take the time, I can get out my Apex maps off my John Deere system. I can show you, I've been using GMOs for 7 years. I can show you some interesting things that not even Monsanto or DuPont will tell you they like. But overall, my yields have significantly increased. We're growing 195 bushel corn on ground that the ASC, now the FSA, the government organizations and the USDA that monitor all of it, still have on the books that the average is 115 bushel corn. I haven't averaged that for years. One of the little pieces of this is that it isn't all from the GMO aspect. It isn't all by success. The success is not all by stacking traits into that hybrid. They have been, because there's more money in it and because the technology is available, they have been able to get better hybrids through the process of incorporating the GMOs. So it's a pretty complicated thing. So when people want to go out there and make it black and white, it isn't black and white. But, you know, the most important thing is the science. Follow the science and then give farmers choices. And I'm good friends with some people at Pioneer and know the folks well at Monsanto. And we don't agree on everything. And part of it is we don't agree on everything on this question that you've asked. Because I think that when people aren't ready to accept something and the system doesn't support what somebody's trying to give them, you just have bigger problems. And so, you know, the magic map in my mind is give me a map of Africa. And we can't do this today. With all the technology in the world, we cannot produce this map today. Give me a map with accuracy that shows me the places in Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, Malawi, forget South Africa, they already got it, that you can put the little spots in there where you say, you know what, we can do high production agriculture here. They can benefit from, you know, large amounts of fertilizer, and they can benefit from GMOs, and they can benefit because they've got the infrastructure and maybe they've got some policies that support it, whatever it is, okay? Show me that map, because I'm going to tell you, it's 10% of Africa or something like that. It could be 7%, it could be 15%. It's not 25%. You have 600 million small farmers that today can't benefit from that technology. So the idea that we're going to go in there and say this is the way you're going to do it, biggest mistake we can make.
All right, let's do questions. O'Day and then Alan. Yeah.
One of the biggest agricultural projects in Africa is in Ethiopia today. And the Saudis have put billions of dollars. And my question to you, have you given them advice as to how to go about it? And secondly, what do you think of that project?
They want my advice about, like the lobbyists on food aid want my advice. I need 6 bodyguards when I leave here now, but it's a great question. I mean, you know, it really goes to the heart of the discussion that's been kind of dubbed land grabs. First of all, I will say Ethiopia has it is a country with one of the largest issues with both things I said we have to have for success: land ownership. You don't have it, and soil fertility is a huge challenge in that country. So those are things I'd be focused on. If Saudi Arabia or any other project like that, I've got a couple of prospectuses at home from invest in Africa. They didn't know better not to send them to me, and so I have a lot of this information, you know. And when you promise 30% returns on agriculture and you can't get, you know, 10% returns in the United States, that's just bullshit. I mean, that's just what it is. And so, you know, you promise you're going to bring the greatest mechanization in the world, but yet, oh, by the way, we're going to employ thousands of people. It doesn't work that way. I farm 5,500 acres with 3 guys. You know, I mean, I don't need 1,000 people. And so there's these contradictions in it. And the bottom line has to be, is my country and are my farmers better off with or without a program like this? And I don't know all the details of that specific. I know what you're talking about, but I don't know all the details. So, you know, what I have to talk a little more conceptually. What I know is the most likely outcomes are, from the experience and the things that I do know about, there's farmers that are displaced and not treated equitably. That's very likely, but I can't tell you that it's happened in that particular case. It's very likely that the water resources and the other land resources are going to be used and consumed at a rate that is not really regulated the way it should be. That has happened in a number of cases. And I can tell you that then if they're shipping all the food out, that's not a good use of your resources as a country that has a lot of people that need food. And the opposite is true. You say, well, I'm going to bring all this food to Ethiopia, which they don't do anyway. But if they did, I'll tell you what, you'll have the markets that you see where 70 NGOs move into Goma, and all the local people can't afford to buy food in the market. So, or the opposite happens, and which Ethiopia had this example. In fact, there's a great example in Ethiopia, the best one there is, of how you increase productivity but don't have a way to deal with it. They had years, I wish I could remember the year, it's in the book, it's 90, anyway. They grew so much, they had so much success at crop production that they left maize stand in the field and rot because it was worth nothing. So, you can't pick and choose pieces of things that take a whole system and just say, hey, we can make this work. So I would be very leery of it. Look, if it brings investment, if it brings opportunity, includes local farmers, if it helps the country in food production and feed more people, I'm 100% for it. Prove it to me first.
Alan? Yeah.
Just wondering if we could move from food and farming to philanthropy for a minute. My son would probably start that with an F as well.
Hey,
Wondering,
you know what N stands for in Nebraska, don't you, for the football team? Knowledge.
Yeah,
So,
right.
I'm with you there.
wondering if you might
like
reflect on
examples,
the state of philanthropy in this country. You've talked about your own approach, and I've got a nice list of focus on being there for the long term, be willing to fail, bet on people, be focused. When you look around, would you urge that same strategy on others? Do you see it? What do you think about philanthropy in this country at this point?
This is the greatest philanthropic country in the world. We are the most generous people. We've gotten to that point for different reasons. And we've also, have to realize that even though we have a great capitalistic system, if you don't have the right aptitude or the right education or the right whatever, you can't benefit from it. So there's a big a void for certain people who cannot benefit from a system like we have. But the system itself produces a lot of wealth, and a lot of that wealth has been used for good things. So I would never argue against the system. I would just say we have to understand it and look for the shortcomings and deal with it. So I don't think it's my place. I can tell you what I believe philosophically, but it's not my place to tell other people how to spend their money. I really believe that. I mean, so part of the reason for writing 40 Chances is to try to convince others that, look, you can do things this way. It's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to take risk. If we can't take risk, who the hell can take risk? I mean, I don't have to hold fundraisers. I don't have to make donors happy. As long as my dad's not mad at me, I'm okay. I mean, I have the easiest thing in the world to spend money. So, I will stand right up there and say, you know what, my goal is to try things that don't work, because when I do that, I'm going to find things that do work that I would never find otherwise. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way you're going to find them. And our whole country's built on that. It's ingenuity, it's innovation, and our whole capitalist system is built on that. So why would you take huge sums of money built that way, made that way, and put it into a system that says you can be mediocre, or if things don't work, you can still spend money on it? You'd be fired as a CEO. Your shareholders would kick you out. So we need a different measuring stick, but part of that is also donors. Donors want to see success. They want to feel like their money did something good. I can tell you we've spent more money after bad ideas than we've ever spent good money. And I'm proud of it, because I want to say that I tried stuff that nobody else tried. I don't want to reinvent the same thing. And so I'll bet on Emmanuel. I'll bet on Joe. I'll bet on Ed Price from Texas A&M. I'll put big bets on him, because it's going to be, you have to bet big sometimes. And so, I believe that what we're trying to say in this book is look at how we've done things for 40 years. What has worked during that 40-year period? What hasn't worked? And then analyze it. And then instead of being scared about what people are going to think, and donors have to change the way they give money. They can't work without that. I mean, donors have to think different. They have to encourage people to take that risk and say, and they can be engaged in this. They can understand why the risk is worth taking. I mean, that's important. I don't expect, to walk in and give, $10 million to somebody and say, well, I'm probably going to go fail. I mean, that's not what I mean. Explain it, take the time to figure it out, explain it to people, and say this is why it's worth the risk. And it's a big risk. But let me tell you something. If we get the largest hydroelectric plant that we just funded, and they just started building in Eastern Congo in the middle of conflict, which no one else would do, I guarantee you, then we bring electricity to 130,000 people. Those 130,000 people want to see that conflict end way more than they do. Well, they want to see it end, period. But I mean, you know, now they've got a bigger reason because their life can change. Kids can study at home. You know, you can build processing plants. You can do all these different things. So give them a reason to hope. And to do that, you know, in that part of the world, it's not simple. It's messy. It's difficult. You get cheated. You get lied to. I mean, you know, but it's just, it goes with the territory. Get in there and get dirty.
Howie, last words?
Last words? Well, I'll just bring it back to how we started, which is, you know, the idea behind 40 Chances is that we have a limited amount of time to make change in the world. And what we've done for ourselves, and what I do think we would want to express to other donors, is give yourself a time horizon. Give yourself a time in which you know you only have this window of opportunity to make a true difference in the world. And so for us, that's 40 years. From the time that my grandfather announced he was leaving his wealth to philanthropy, we have 40 years. 40
Well, tell them
chances.
why, though, exactly.
What, in what?
Because we have a sunset
So,
clause.
well, yeah,
We're-
we have yeah. So no, I mean, Dad put the sunset clause in there. This was not a mandate from my grandfather. This was something that my dad said. We will acknowledge the fact that we want to walk the talk, I guess is what we're saying. And that's why we know we have 40 years to make this difference. And by the end of those 40 years, every single dollar that we've been given by Warren will be out the door and making change in the world.
Walter, Dad gets the last word here.
Oh, yeah.
It's just to take it to the next step. If people and organizations could think in what Howie just described, that I need to be out of business in 40 years. What am I going to do differently? I'm going to do a lot of things differently, okay? I'm going to quit worrying about some things, and I'm going to worry about other things, and it's going to be more urgent. And so, you know, I just say adopt a time frame in your head that says, I've got 40 years to do it. The one thing my dad did say to us in that respect is, he said two things. Don't ever try to bat 1,000 because you'll never do anything important. And so he's all for us going out there and doing what we're doing. But, you know, he always encouraged us to be able to look at the horizon and say, I don't need an endowment for my grandkids. What I need to do is put all my time and effort and use this money as intelligently as I can and do it in a lifetime where I know what I want to get done. The problems are big enough today. They take every bit of money and effort we have. Why would I wait for, you know, another generation to do it?
Great. Well, the book is 40 Chances. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Walter.